Thank you so much, and thank you for speaking about the importance of partnership. You would all know that among the Sustainable Development Goals that were decided by bold leaders, I would say in 2015, one of the goals, the goal 17, is about partnership. The UN Secretary General at that time, he said that the stars must have been aligned in 2015, because that year the world leaders took two important, or even three important decisions on sustainability in all dimensions. That is, that we will not have economic sustainable development unless we take into consideration social aspects and social sustainability. And certainly we will not have nor economic or social sustainable development unless we respect the borders of our planet. It's really about people and planet. We had also the important decision on the Paris Agreement to combat climate change, and not least, there was this awareness in 2015 that the governments of the world would not be able to make this on their own, so there was also the decision on financing for development. And here we are, now almost 5 years later, moving into what needs to be a decade of action. And then, of course, we really need these kind of partnerships and discussions that we are having here these days. So thank you. It is a true pleasure to see so many colleagues and partners here with us this evening. And on behalf of the Global Steering Group, I really want to wish and extend sincere thanks and appreciation for those of you who are here committed not only these days but onwards. And many of you have been really pioneers within this field that can enable the Sustainable Development Goals to become reality and to be that creator of hope that the world certainly needs today, not least the young generation. I recently heard a powerful comparison that helps us somewhat to visualize what's otherwise a bit hard to grasp with regard to global statistics. And we've heard about the importance of knowledge and statistics and data. If we describe our world today as a village of 100 people, 11 of them, and an increasing number, will still suffer from hunger and malnutrition. 10 actually still, even though we have made enormous progress, live in extreme poverty. 42 of them exclusively rely on biomass for heating and for cooking, and we know what that does, both to our environment but also to our health. 21 still lack access to electricity, and 10 still lack access to clean water. 35 out of these 100 would still lack access to sanitation, and 6 of them to essential health care services. And then, of course, in these times of increasing inequality of the world, we have a situation where one of the person in this village of 100 person owns more wealth than more than half of the entire village combined. There has been an explosion of inequality in the world of today. United Nations Development Programme, UNDP, will in a few days now present our Human Development Report focusing on increasing inequality. And we see it across the world, also in my country, in Sweden. This is really a threat to our society. 1.3 billion people in the world are still what we call, in our data, multidimensionally poor. They are being left behind across 3 dimensions when we measure it, that is health, education, and also standard of living. And then we would know and understand the importance of measuring even broader aspects than this. More than 2/3 of these multidimensional poor, they live in middle-income countries. And we know also with the statistics and the work we have done together with the OECD that we have a shrinking middle class and thus perhaps a shrinking hope for people what can actually be the future of their children and grandchildren. But as I said, what's most alarming is that the situation is actually getting worse. And also how new challenges are threatening the future. The Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change warns that if global temperatures rise more than 1.5 degrees, as we have decided upon, by the end of this century, and you would all know that it's happening much, much faster than we have believed. Of course, then, poor, but not only the poor countries, will face challenges, including destruction of their countries, or at least entire communities. People will suffer more and disproportionately in those countries where they have really not contributed to the situation that we have ended up in. We saw, of course, in September already in Bahamas how it was devastated by the Hurricane Dorian, and we see today in many countries. You saw the past week's news from Venice in Italy. So this tells us that so many of the challenges that we have ahead of us, that we as an informed society actually do have the answer to, that we actually can deal with, they cannot be dealt with in isolation. And that is why it is so important to speak about partnership, and that is why it's so important to speak about the importance of multilateralism and multilateral organizations. The 2030 Agenda provides us with this risk map that I've been speaking about, what the world looks like, but it also tells us what the world can look like. It's a blueprint for the future, and it tells us that the future can be so much brighter and so much more hopeful if we work together, and if we work closely between governments, civil society, academia, but not least with the private sector. Business and finance leaders increasingly realize, and certainly I don't need to tell you this, that investing in the sustainable development goals or in line with them is not only the right thing to do, but also the smart thing to do. We don't want to see any stranded assets. And we are actually, and I think that you are the ones who are also creating this momentum, seeing the mainstreaming and integration of sustainability issues into the investment decisions and enterprise activities, not least as we were speaking about during the lunch this morning, because the young generation entering into our businesses, they require this. One of the main driving forces for this transformation is the growing proof that integrating environmental, social and economic and governance issues, ESGs, and addressing material sustainability impacts translate also into financial returns, especially in the medium and long run. For example, a 2017 study by the largest financial service group in the Nordic region, the Nordea Equity Research from Sweden, show that from 2012 to 2015, the companies with the highest ESG ratings outperformed firms with the lowest ESG ratings by as much as 40%. Isn't that promising? Of course, you would also know, knowing this area of work so well, that time is limited and that we still have major barriers to overcome and achieve what we need to do. My colleagues spent several months surveying investors and corporate executives in 2018 to learn what kind of barriers they confronted when allocating capital to the SDGs. And we heard some very clear messages that we thought that we could be of help to address. What we hear, and you would recognize this, is that there is no real pipeline for investable opportunities. And also that when you go into country looking for SDG-aligned investments, there is not enough of knowledge also within the governments, and how would they then be prepared to work and prepare the ground for the investments. It's of course difficult to take informed decisions. What does the reality look like on the ground, but not least, what kind of data do we have to really understand reality? And also that there is a need to have a recognized authority figure who could verify what just isn't impact washing. Because I do believe that even though we see more and more colleagues going with these SDG pins, we should also be concerned whether what they do is actually for real, and if we are speaking about real impact. This message that we heard when speaking to people resonates well with the data that we have also seen from the McKinsey and Company's 2019 survey on sustainability, reporting on this. The survey finds that investor demand for consistent and comparable data to enable informed decision-making as the number one issue boards and executives need to understand. So what could then UNDP, the world's largest development organization of the United Nations, do to support what we need to do? Well, earlier this year, we established what we have called the Sustainable Development Goals, or the SDGs Finance Hub, drawing together so many different already existing strands of work in order to support governments, but also support governments and other actors to see to that we can align public and private capital with the global goals. We launched what we have called the SDG Impact at the end of last year, and now we have a catalytic platform designed to combine the unique strengths of United Nations Development Programme with presence in 170 of the 193 member states, including then the stewardship of the SDGs with consensus building efforts of the impact management project. So the SDG Impact combines market intelligence, local market facilitation, and strong impact management practice. This is the idea. The effect is to shine a spotlight where SDG enabling investment is needed, and we could then help to do that. And see to that we have guide rails that can make it easier to translate intention into action. And then at the end, hopefully, and this is what we're aiming at now developing this program, also authenticate marking leading practices to give a seal that can actually tell that we are doing the right things. Market intelligence translates data collected by UNDP in a user-friendly and market-facing information, and secondary data is filtered by a range of criteria in distilled investment opportunity areas to address that SDG-related needs, and also have the potential for scale, and also, of course, because we work closely with governments and official institutions, can also support policymakers. So just to give you a small example where we are doing now our piloting in not a very small country because it's Brazil, there we can see already in the testing that we have been doing that there's huge potential. So just one example for you to see. Brazil is the world's fourth largest food producer, and this is quite striking, I must say, it experiences, and listen here, 50% of lost of its grain yield. 50% is lost. So you can imagine the complexity of this and also the potential to solve this problem and how it can contribute to so many of the SDGs, not least the Sustainable Development Goal 2 on zero hunger. So the Brazilian government is currently encouraging investment in improved grain storage as a result of the SDG investor mapping that we have been doing. And they are convening now investors and government officials to share the 20 other investment opportunities that we have been able also to find through the investment mapping that we have done in Brazil. So investors seeking an impact on world hunger might find attractive opportunities now in Brazil's grain storage infrastructure, a sector that wouldn't even be on the radar if no one looked for it. And like grain storage, as I said, there are so many new opportunities that we found through this exercise that we have been doing. And we are now starting also to do this exercise with the maps in additional 6 countries during the coming year. I am hopeful when I look at this and what I have seen so far that this can actually provide leaders with the critical building blocks and answer those questions that I mentioned that you also have heard so many times. And following through on the opportunities identified in these maps, SDG Impact instrument by UNDP will also help to shorten, hopefully, the timetable from the interest in the actual investment to the possibility to capitalize on the footprint that we have also with offices in so many countries. So if we can shorten that time, we can actually also speed up action as we have promised to do in the final decade of the implementation of the SDGs. SDGs Impact's third and most ambitious pillar is then impact management, and we aim to have reliable, broadly accepted way to quantify SDG outcomes. I think it is important that a UN entity actually provides the market with this, where we can actually clarify what it means to be SDG aligned and enabling. And I think also that the customers and many people will start to ask these questions about the quality of the consistency in relation to the SDGs. The SDG Impact Assurance Standards for private equity were released for public comment in early September this year, and feedback sessions have been held, and maybe you have participated, some of you, in some of them, in New York, in Europe, in Asia, and Latin America, and there are also plans for additional sessions in India and Africa, reaching hundreds of industry participants. 40 private equity funds have globally signed to pilot these standards, and they are, of course, then following this very closely, trying it out, and also giving us very concrete and good feedback how to improve and develop the standards so that they can actually work on their own. Backed by levels of assurance and the SDG Impact Seal for market-leading practice, the standards promise then to enhance trust and to put strong SDG-aligned impact practice at the heart of performance. Assurance standards for bond issuance and for enterprises are now under production within the industry reference group guidance, and that will be forthcoming from December and onwards. And every year, more and larger investors speak about the intentions to have their money to improve the world. And this is why we believe that what we are trying out now, based on the many experiences that we also find in this very room, can actually be something that will be asked for and that we can use together. Together with the GSG, UNDP will help to establish up to 8 new national advisory boards for impact in developing countries. And we will also work together to drive adaptation for market development initiatives, including development and dissemination of market intelligence and the SDG enabling investment opportunities through the new UNDP SDG investor maps that I've mentioned. And then, of course, also providing training in impact management. To finalize, the new commitment by GSG to catalyze impact investment and, not least, entrepreneurship in emerging and developing countries is truly commendable. And we are, as UNDP, truly also delighted to be partners, to be able also to drive adoption for the achievement of the global agenda. Needless to say, each and every one here in this room, you can count on United Nations Development Programme, our commitment and our interest to work closely together with you. This world does not need more division. It needs more people coming together to find solutions and to create that promise and show that Goal 17 on partnership can actually make that change that we need to make change when we have a situation where we are somewhat even going in reverse in relation to the goals that we promised the younger generation in 2015. So I'm very encouraged by all the people being here, the movement I see within this community and the change that we can actually make. And I'm really looking forward to follow this, and I'm looking forward also to be very much part of driving that change as UNDP will continue to commit. Thank you very much.
Thank you.